I'm very excited about today. We have a very, very distinguished guest in our midst.
I'll say
that has been on the last 2 episodes of Bear Grease. Gene Hopkins. It's such a pleasure. Thank you for coming to Arkansas.
Well, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you guys inviting me. This is exciting for me.
Yes. Well, so to fill you in, if you haven't been paying attention, we did an original episode on Ishi, which that's what we're going to talk about extensively in this episode. We're gonna cover some kind of housekeeping stuff up front, but just to let you know where we're going with this, we did an episode. Well, we've now done 2 episodes. We did episode 1 on Ishi, which was basically his history and life before coming into Oroville, California in 1911. His history with what we know of the Yahi, and just fascinating story. Going to get into it. Then we interrupted the series, which we've never done before. Forgive us. We put out an episode where I interviewed Ted Koppel, which was just an interesting episode, and we dropped it. And then now we've come back to do the final episode with Gene that came out on the Bear Grease feed, Ishi 2, basically. So we're going to talk about all that.
Awesome episode, by the way.
Yes.
Agreed.
No doubt. When I first started Bear Grease 5 years ago, Gene, I was telling him this earlier, I had to write out 26 potential topics for this podcast because we do a Bear Grease proper, our documentary style episode every 2 weeks. And MeatEater was like, okay, well, what are you going to talk about? Make a year's schedule.
Right.
And Ishi was on that original list, but it's taken me 5 years to get to it. So,
well, I hope the wait was worth it.
Oh man, I think it's perfect timing, and yeah, we're gonna get into all of it. Before we do, there's 3 things I want to talk about: the MeatEater live tour that's coming up, the Christmas
My tickets.
live tour. You got your tickets?
I got a whole table, man.
Did you?
I did.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I haven't decided who the other pair of people I'm going to invite.
Oh
is.
wow, you might.
I could raffle it off.
You could bring in a Bear Grease listener. Yeah. The Fayetteville show is sold out.
Exactly, except for the 2 tickets I've got.
There's six shows. There's a show in Birmingham, Nashville, Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee, Fayetteville, Arkansas, Dallas, Texas, and Austin, Texas. 6 cities, 6 nights in December, the 17th through the 22nd, I believe. And I'm so proud of Fayetteville, Arkansas. The smallest city on the tour, right? I mean, all those other cities are huge, big metropolises. And MeatEater came to us 3 and said, "Do you think it would work in Fayetteville?" And what did we say? We said, "Buddy," speaking to MeatEater as if it were a man, "Buddy, you better believe that people in Arkansas are going to show up for MeatEater Live." Sold out.
You better rent Razorback Stadium because we're going to fill it up.
Sold out in 3 days. Sold out
3 days?
Yeah, it was before they even actually went on regular sale. It was like pre-sale.
It was like the pre-release.
Yeah, and so all the other shows are filling up quick, but MeatEater Live Tour. I had a lot of people ask me what the live tour is. It's like a 2-hour variety show.
That's a great description.
Yeah, it'll be Steve Ranella, Brent Reeves, Giannis Putelis, Randall Williams, and myself. Every city will have a couple of local guests who will be there, like surprise guests that we're not going to tell you who they are, but people that when you see them, you'll be like, whoa, they're going to be there. And like, there's going to be music, trivia, storytelling, crowd participation, a lot going on. And so it's really fun. I mean, even if you had non-hunting family, I would be very shocked if you would bring them to this and they wouldn't be entertained.
Yes, I would agree.
I mean, just a lot of fun. So excited. So you better get your tickets for the rest of the shows if you're going to go, because they're probably going to sell out.
And if you're trying to get into the Fayetteville show, sorry.
You could petition Josh to let you at his table.
I'll be auctioning this.
You should. What if we left one spot for that table and we could have people write in why they wanted to be there?
It's not a bad idea.
You know what? I want to say this too. I don't take it for granted that we can have a live show and sell out like it's really it means a lot to us that people are willing and want to come and see us. So I don't take it for granted that that people are willing to do that. So thanks everybody.
Thanks for selling out.
And thanks for showing up in Arkansas.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, man, if you need a good deer call, this is a blatant sales pitch. Get ready.
It just so happens to be deer season.
Yeah, this Phelps acorn grunter made in burnt Osage orange.
The burnt Osage orange, I'm a little jealous of that one. I've got an acrylic
wood, don't
one.
you,
I like
Gene?
that wood, yes.
Yeah.
Bodark.
So this is, we call it the acorn grunter, and it's an inhale, exhale grunt bleat. You can flip it, and it's the opposite. Then it's a blow for the bleat, inhale for the grunt. But I wanted Jason Phelps to make a call a single call with a bleat and a
It's
grunt.
a great idea.
Because, man, I use a bleat as much as I use a grunt. And I've called in a lot of deer with a doe bleat, including this is the deer hunter's call. That's what I call it, the deer hunter's call, because I kill a lot of doe deer by calling them in with a doe bleat. I mean, doe out there at 40 yards, she's not coming to your buck grunt, but it's a deer that you want to take.
Right.
Man, during the early season especially, a doe deer will respond to a doe bleat pretty good. What do you think, Bear?
I agree.
All hype? All commercialization and hype?
I don't think so.
Pretty good call.
I think so. And I was just looking at this one. These bodark trees have some pretty nice growth rings on them, too.
So it's pretty good bodark?
Pretty good bodark.
Could have made a good bow, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, look.
Shame
you
they
see-
cut them up into calls.
Yeah, right there. It's got some thin rings, but up here, those are prime rings.
Now, thin rings would be better, though, right? Tighter growth, hard years.
They're just a lot tougher to work with.
Really
and
small
if
rings?
if you like hit them on a tree stand or rock or something, they violate a lot easier.
Violate. Wow,
Wow,
that's
that's-
a big word for
Yeah, man.
talking
Sounds
about bow
terrible.
wood.
Yeah, man. Because then it blows up the whole bow.
If the rings are tight.
Yeah, I mean,
So
like
what
if
you're
you
telling me, is there a metaphor? We find in life a lot of times trees are used as metaphors for life. Jesus did it. He said the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed that grows in the biggest tree,
Right.
and the birds can. So you're telling me, I would have thought that the tight rings meant hard years, which meant growth of character in tight rings.
Well, you were
Y'all
wrong.
follow me?
Well, you were
follow me?
wrong.
Hey, the bowyer over here, he knows what he's talking about.
I've made some bows with tight rings, and they're great bows, but if it's got a thick ring, it's just more security.
Okay.
Easier to stay within the ring while you're making the bow, eh?
Yep, exactly.
That's probably part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, third thing, and then we're going to start talking about Ishi and Gene, who's like the most interesting man in the world.
Yes. I don't always talk about
My grandkids
those, but
think
when I
that.
do.
Your grandkids. Well, we do too. So this is like super serious. In Arkansas this week, there was another black bear fatality. If you're paying attention on the national, it's been in New York Times.
BBC.
Did the BBC report on it?
Yep.
It's been in all the major headlines, and all the news outlets have covered it. MeatEater covered it, but there was a second bear fatality in less than 30 days in Arkansas, in recorded history. What I would call modern history. There's not been a black bear fatality in Arkansas since the 1800s.
Since Gerstocker.
There was some after that,
kidding.
but usually they were induced inside of a hunting situation with dogs. I mean, like Erskine was killed.
Right.
Dogs were baying a bear. Guy killed. Like
Right.
1843. A man. September 3rd, there was a man just south of us, about an hour near the Mulberry River, on a tractor grading his gravel road on a I think was a New Holland tractor, and
No connection between bear attacks and New Holland.
A little bear. I mean,
80 pounds, wasn't
80-pound bear comes up. He films the bear, and he's like talking to the bear, and next, this bear's kind of like catwalking, like getting real close, and basically he stops filming, and the next thing, the bear jumps on the tractor, pulls him off the tractor, and basically gives injuries to the guy that caused him to pass away several weeks later after being
Like a
in
couple
ICU.
weeks. Yeah.
So that was just wild, and it felt like just lightning struck, and it was this one-off thing.
Right. That's so unusual.
It's so unusual. And then last Thursday, a man was discovered at a campsite in the Ozarks at a very popular place called Sam's Throne, which is in National Forest, a place where rock climbers climb some big sheer-face bluffs, and just a big National Forest campground. And a man from Missouri, 60-year-old man. They released his name today.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, or yesterday. His name was Max Thomas. And he had sent a picture to his wife on Tuesday of a bear in his camp. And had just been like, wow, this is interesting. Bear in the camp. Not threatened, just had this bear. Basically, he goes radio silent. And on Thursday, they call the sheriff and say, hey, we do a welfare check. My husband can't get him. Haven't talked to him since Tuesday. They go and basically there's signs of distress in the camp, and they basically find the man 194 feet away, appeared to have been mauled by a black bear. And they put that two together by the pictures and then by evidence there. And in a unique circumstances I can't really talk about fully, Bear Newcomb and I were that night called to go to the scene.
This is like an hour from us.
Yes.
Hour and a half from us.
Yeah. And so Bear and I went there that night, and we helped round up guys that had some dogs that would tree a bear, and they free cast dogs, but this track was potentially a couple days old by now. Didn't get the bear. Game and Fish comes in. Game and Fish authorized the use of dogs. It's not legal to run bear with dogs in Arkansas. Game and Fish director, along with the bear coordinator and other people, authorized the use. And Glenn Wheeler, the sheriff of Newton County, he was on the scene. Unique guy, a hunter, kind of had a little bit of background in besides just law enforcement, but being around bears and whatnot. Anyway, the Game and Fish puts up traps and bucket snare traps and big tube traps. Puts up cell cameras all over the place. They shut down the campground, and basically the best bet is to wait for the bear to come back. And but we all suspected that the bear would not go in the trap, because we've been baiting bears in Arkansas here, Gene, and it got to where you couldn't hardly take a bear over bait just because they were eating acorns. I mean, mass crop, just a bumper crop.
Right. They love those acorns and the protein.
Yes, they do. And so basically we were the houndsmen were on call, the guys that had these dogs, and on Sunday, Game and Fish got a picture, and the bear just walked right past all the traps, just didn't even go in them. And the houndsmen were called, and within 2 hours, dogs were on the ground, and within an hour of the dogs being on the ground, essentially, they treed this bear. And so the question that remains, and this has been, I'm not saying anything that has not been put out by the media.
Right.
We don't know 100% that the bear that was killed by Game and Fish and these houndsmen, we don't know if that was the bear. But we know for sure that it was a juvenile male that was in the camp with this guy. And we know that this was the only and the first bear that showed back up at the spot, and it was a juvenile male. It's hard, the markings on the bear, it's hard to say. I mean, the bear had a tan muzzle. The bear that was killed had a tan muzzle. So it's difficult to but there were no other distinguishing characteristics that just.
Well, the test will come back.
That's right. So the DNA test will come back. We'll know for certain if it was the bear or not. But a lot of people. I would imagine this year in the state there's going to be a lot of bear encounters that have always happened, and people are probably going to overreact a little bit to them. I think it's already happened.
Right.
Even this week, there's been reports of a bear that was kind of terrorizing people at a camp, which, to my knowledge, with the information I have right now, which this is being recorded before you're hearing this.
Right.
But right now, this morning, there was a news report of a bear terrorizing some campers. And I
in the area?
Yeah, yesterday.
For real?
Yes. In Franklin County, these hikers on the Ozark Highlands Trail reported a bear giving them a lot of trouble. The real story and what is in the soundbite is, to my understanding right now today, is quite a bit different. And it probably was fairly normal bear behavior, and no one was hurt. No one was attacked. No doubt it was a little bit scary for someone.
Sure. But
to my knowledge, it would not have been that abnormal. I mean, like, basically a bear came into the camp.
People are hypersensitized right now.
Right. They are. And so I think a lot of that's going to happen this year, maybe all over bear country.
Yeah.
And here's the bottom line, is if you have a bear casually dealing with you that is hanging around, you need to get the heck out of there, and you need to do everything you can to get that bear out of there.
Yep.
Like, it's not abnormal to see a bear cruise past your camp. I mean, sometimes they're pretty nonchalant, especially when there's food involved, and that doesn't mean that bear is a super threat.
Right.
But, man, with the current circumstance, if I saw a bear that was casual with its encounters with humans, I mean, you need to run that bear off. You don't need to casually handle it.
Don't be standing there taking pictures of him.
I mean, that's the truth anywhere.
Yeah.
That's the truth anywhere in bear country, is you just can't be lackadaisical. 99,000 out of 100,000 times that bear is not going to do anything with you, but for whatever reasons, it's happened twice in the last month here. So, anyway.
Well, our condolences to the family.
No doubt.
Terrible, tragic end to these guys.
Yeah. No doubt.
Common sense in the bear woods.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I'd probably be carrying some pepper spray these days too.
Yeah.
Wouldn't hurt.
It's kind of changed the way Bear and I think about black bears.
Yeah.
I mean, we've kind of built a ideology of just casual, just like, hey, these bears aren't going to hurt you. You got a better chance of getting, hurt on the highway, or
right.
An engagement with a human's probably more dangerous than any bear encounter you'll ever have. But there's something about being arm's reach from an attack like this that makes you kind of just go, golly. You'd hope you're just prepared.
Yeah.
But I just want to say it over and over again. Man, bears are expanding their range all across the country. Bear and humans are overlapping more and more and more. And there's nothing to be afraid of. That's something to be celebrated, in my opinion, in the vast majority of Americans' opinion. But you just can't be casual with them. You can't be casual.
Yep.
Can't let them just come in your camp and
don't feed them.
Don't feed them.
Again, common sense.
Yep.
That's right. That's right. Bear, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it was definitely pretty wild to be that close to a bear attack. Like, the first one happened, and I mean, it was pretty wild, but it didn't really change any way that I would have gone about in bear country. But seeing the second one and actually being there was like definitely extremely eye-opening.
Yeah.
To what they could do. It definitely, like, we were in the bear woods yesterday bear hunting, and I was definitely a lot more, like, I was considering what could happen a lot more.
Yeah.
And just being a lot more cautious about, like, getting really close to bears, and especially small bears.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably the biggest takeaway, isn't it?
Yeah, because both bears are juvenile males.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. On average, over the last 100 years, there's been one black bear fatality in North America per year, on average. Some years there's been
In North America, like
North America,
wow,
average, one per year. But that means some years there's none.
right,
Some years there's 3,
right,
maybe 4, but on average, 1. If you're killed by a black bear, there is upwards of a 90-degree chance that it was a juvenile male that killed you. This is where the statistics get interesting. But if you're just attacked, like if you just come away with some bites and some scratches, it's like 13 times higher a risk that would be a sow with cubs. I've talked to a lot of people who said, "Oh, probably a sow with cubs," and I went, "No, a sow with cubs, her objective inside of an attack would be to defend her cubs just enough so they could get away. Like, she doesn't want to eat you." There's a big, huge distinction between a sow with cubs defending her territory in a close range encounter and the very rare thing that is called a predatory attack. When a bear sets his sights on you and his intent is to kill you. It's a thing. So does that make sense? So if you're dead, it was probably a juvenile male that did it.
right.
If you were attacked and
Right.
not killed, it was most likely a sow with cubs. Upwards of like 13 times higher chance. So there's over 10 to 15 people per year that get attacked by
Right.
black bears but survive. The vast majority of those are sows with cubs. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
So the stats are different. Now, grizzlies is a whole different story, like completely different story that we're not even talking about here. But on average, 2 people per year get killed by grizzlies in North America. And when you consider how many fewer grizzlies there are
Right.
and the smaller range, you extrapolate that out. Black bears are all over the place, from Maine to Old Mexico, from Florida to Alaska, everywhere in between except the Great Plains states, essentially. And we have 1 bear kill per year. Grizzlies are essentially in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and then in Canada up to Alaska. I mean, the range is dramatically smaller, and there's 2 kills per year, and the attacks are much more. There was a guy an elk hunter attacked pretty critically this week. So grizz is a different story. We're talking about black bears. And that's why, and this is kind of in the weeds, but that's why it helps to understand what you're doing. If you are attacked by a sow with cubs, your best bet is to cover your head and neck, get in a ball, and act like you're dead. Because all she wants to do is extinguish the threat.
Threat's over.
Yep.
She will leave you alone and go to her cubs, chuckle her cubs out of the tree, and get out of there. If it is a predatory animal, predatory meaning stalking, direct eye contact, persistence in won't leave, if that bear attacks you, you better fight for your life because he is trying to kill you.
Right.
The majority of bear attacks have wounds on the forearms where people put up their arm to protect themselves and they get bit on the arm and they have lacerations and bites all over the face. A black bear goes for your face.
Yep.
It's interesting. Like they don't really kill with the precision of like a big cat.
Right.
Like a big cat would go for the throat. And I mean, big cat fatalities in humans is just like incredibly rare. It does happen. But a black bear is more of just like a mauling.
Right.
But they do target on the head. And you think about it, when I don't know if you've ever seen black bears fight, but when 2 male black bears fight, they target the head of the other male. I mean, like they grab each other's ears and they put their arms up almost like they're boxing and fight. And so, I mean, a lot of interesting parallels, but as dark as all that is, black bears and humans, this conflict isn't going away.
Yeah.
And the more we kind of educate people, but a lot of people have asked me, like, well, do you run or do you yell? Man, if a bear came into my camp, just casually strolled by my camp, and I'm sitting there camping with my food and everything, I would yell and scream and throw stuff and stomp around. And, I mean, if you can, leave.
Yeah.
At best, put your food up way away from your camp. I mean, that's standard procedure. Is to put your store your food away from your camp, because they really don't want you. They want your food. They're attracted to the camp,
Right.
to the food. So that's my take on the situation, and just true condolences to the family there in Missouri. Just super sad situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Terrible.
one more thing that I learned just from the two is that if you're not armed and a black bear wants to kill you, it's probably going to kill you. Like, that's the thing that I learned was like there's no reason to necessarily be afraid of them, but like if it's wanting to kill you, it's like you're not going to fight it off. Like, these were like 80-pound bears.
Yeah.
And there's like no way you're going to fight one off unless you're armed.
That is a good point, because I talked to a buddy of mine this week. He's a big guy, like probably 230 pounds. And we had this conversation about, like, if a 100-pound bear got on you, you could just fend it off like you would a dog. 100 pounds of bear muscle is way stronger than 100 pounds of human muscle.
And their reflexes so fast, the claws and the teeth, we're no match.
I think that's the thing. Like, if a bear hits you in the face with claws, I mean, you're done. Like, even if he takes your vision or something like that, it's like you have no defense against that.
Yeah. And if you've ever seen bears fight, which you probably have sitting on bear baits in Canada, like I have, man, golly.
They're wicked.
You wouldn't want to be there. You wouldn't want to be on the other end of them just really wanting to tear into you.
Yeah. And back to what you said about them going for the face, a lot of times you'll see an old bear, but this face is all scarred up from the fights. You know, when they're fighting each other, they're going for the head. They're trying to rip each other's head off. They bite, they claw, and the muzzles are all scarred. You know, you can see an old boar bear. He's been in some battles, and those scars all show on his muzzle.
Yeah. And the ears.
Yeah.
Ears would be tore up.
Right.
You know, where they're biting at each other.
It just makes me reevaluate that whole video where you and Brent were in the stand and that bear comes in the blind. Like, that could have turned south in a hurry.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. Well, that was a kind of a dark introduction to a wonderful topic. The story of Ishi, to me, is one of the great stories of this continent.
I agree. No matter what angle you come from, if you come at it like from the angle of bow hunting, you know, and our archery and bow hunting history, or if you just come at it from an angle of, you know, anthropology and the history of Native Americans in our country, the evolution of man, you know, the treatment of how we treat each other, no matter what angle you come at this story from, it's just fascinating.
Yes. But Gene, give us a little introduction. People would have heard me talk about you some on the podcast, but you have a long history in bow hunting. But I can say this, and you could too if you weren't so humble. You have one of, if not the premier collection of bow hunting artifacts in the country.
Yeah, I do. You know, take away the humble part of it, but I'm fascinated with history, you know, and I've always been a history buff in school. History was my favorite topic, but then I love hunting with a bow and arrow. So to be able to put the history of hunting with a bow and arrow together, you know, how much better can it be? So I've always been a collector, you know, a saver, When I was young, I collected coins, and I collected stamps, and I collected vintage firearms. But I started saving old archery equipment just because, as bow hunters, we do that. We throw our old broadheads in a drawer, and pretty soon you've got a drawer full of 19 different broadheads. And then you move from saving to collecting. But I really don't think of it as collecting anymore. I think of it as caretaking. What I'm doing is preserving. What I hope I'm doing is preserving the items, but not just the items, but the story of the items and the story of the people who use those items. I'm caretaking that for my generation. And there'll be a time when I'm looking for somebody like Bear, who's the next caretaker. And that's me, our duty. That's what we owe those people who came before us, the pioneers, the Fred Bears, and the Glen St. Charles. We owe that to them to keep their story alive, all the work they did for us and all the sacrifices they made for us to keep that story alive and keep their spirit alive by keeping their story alive.
Will you tell me what is in your museum? Give me a rundown.
A lot of people will collect something or save something that is most interesting to them. I have a really good friend in Michigan, John Cabisa, and John focuses on the history of bow hunting in Michigan. Other people will collect just simply Fred Bear items or Ben Pearson items and things, from the history of those people or those companies. For me, it's the history of the pioneers of our sport. So when I quantify that, what I'm saying is, pre-1950. In 1950, our sport was off the ground pretty good through the efforts of Fred Bear and Glen St. Charles and Howard Hill and Roy Case and a lot of different people. But prior to 1950, our sport was going through some really difficult times. We had been, as the bow and arrow, had been largely forgotten. Even the Native Americans had forgotten about the bow and arrow when the gun came along. If you wanted to go hunting, you went hunting to survive. You went hunting to feed your family. So you wouldn't take a bow and arrow, you'd take a rifle or a shotgun. Well, in the late 1800s, a couple of brothers, the Thompson brothers from Crawfordsville, Indiana, wrote a book called The Witchery of Archery. And it was right after the Civil War. And right after the Civil War, for the first time in our country's history, people are starting to have a little bit of free time, and they're starting to have a little bit of free spending money. So you see a lot of sports growing at that time. You see badminton, you see tennis, you see bicycling, and things like that start to appear as sports. And we're starting to look for things to do with that spare time and that spare money. So when they wrote that book, The Witchery of Archery, was published in 1878, people around the country are reading this book, and they're reading the magazine articles that these guys are writing, and they're saying, that sounds like fun, bow and arrow. Oh, I'd forgotten about that. Let's go find us a bow and arrow. Let's go out and shoot. And at that time, not a lot of people were hunting with a bow and arrow. The Thompson brothers were, a few others were, but target archery started to become a big deal. And the National Archery Association was formed in 1879 through the efforts of the Thompson brothers and the exposure they gave to our sport. So now we start to see a lot of clubs springing up around the country of shooting targets with a bow and arrow. Well, that kind of tailed off a little bit, around 1900 or so. And then the story of Ishi comes along. 1911, Ishi comes down, meets Pope. You've heard all this, in the two podcasts we did before. And then Pope writes this book, Hunting with the Bow and Arrow, and he publishes this in 1923. Now, this book really ignites a revolution of fire of people that want to go out and hunt with a bow and arrow. I told briefly the story of Doug Easton in the earlier podcast. Doug was out as a teenager hunting small game rabbits with a shotgun, and they come back to the car for a break, and one of the shotguns falls over, discharges, and part of the shot hit Doug in the legs. Well, Doug spends a year in the hospital recovering from the wounds. And during that time, somebody brings him one of Pope's books about hunting with the bow and arrow. And he read the book, and all that time and all the different operations he had in the hospital, he reads this book, and it fires him up about archery. So, that's what got Doug Easton into archery. And he started shortly after that, in the 1920s, he started Easton Archery Company. So story after story after story of people that are coming from that, let's say, that point of Ishi being the spark that ignited the fire. and then Pope and Young and Compton starting that fire and carrying that fire to the next generation. And that's why we're here today. If that hadn't happened, if Ishi hadn't been the spark, if Pope hadn't looked down his window that day and saw Ishi shooting the bow out there on the grounds of the University of California, Pope hadn't walked out of his office and went down to Ishi and, "What are you doing?" "I'm shooting a bow." "That looks like fun." Pope grew up in Texas, and there were a lot of Native Americans still around, and they were still shooting bows. But, it was fun. It was a game to them, right? So he had been exposed to a bow and arrow, but that day when he saw Ishi out there on the lawn shooting the bows, when he went out and he said, "You know what, I want to do this. I want to become an archer." And eventually then that translated or transformed into, "I want to become a bow hunter."
And I think what made the Ishi story and Pope that be such a lightning strike is because of the nature of who Ishi was, completely disconnected from Western civilization. And, if you listen to the first episode, you would have seen Ishi's like 50 years old, been in hiding his entire life.
Right.
His people were incredibly primitive, surprisingly primitive. Like when you understand the history of Native Americans across the country, you see this like slow roll of either extermination, removal to reservations, or assimilation, essentially.
Right.
I mean, and so there were Native Americans, presumably, that were still shooting bows and whatnot during that time. But with Ishi, he stepped out of the woods, and that had been the primary tool for his entire life to gather protein.
That's the only thing he knew was the bow and arrow.
Yeah. It's. I want to ask you a question. Do you think, me and Bear had this conversation yesterday, Ishi is this one guy out of that entire civilization that was, became the epicenter of archery? My question is, how good was Ishi? Because imagine us picking a bow hunter out of all the people that we know, and that guy being the single touch point for archery. And I wonder if people in his company, in his tribe, I mean, even for generations before, would have been like one extreme would have been like, Ishi was the best archer, bow hunter, bowyer, flint knapper of all time. Thank goodness that he was the one that made it through to talk to Saxon Pope. Or do you think they would be like, Ishi?
You're kidding me, right?
That guy was like,
have you seen his flint napping?
You should have had this guy. How good do you think Ishi was?
Okay, I'm going to break that into two. As far as flint napping goes, I think he must have been one of the best.
Really?
You look at his points, and I wish, at some point I want you to look at the point that I've got of his.
Yeah, I'd love to see
And you see the skill that's in that, and to be able to make a point that precise. And that know how it is, how hard it is to make one thin and still keep that integrity of the point. And it's this long and it's so narrow and it's so finely made.
But could that have been like baseline competency though? I mean, do you think like everybody was that?
I've got some other points that came from that area.
Okay,
and they're most of those are obsidian points, and Ishi liked to make points from glass. And even before the 1911, before the capture, he would, when they were raiding the stock cabins, and they were raiding the settlers' cabins, they would sometimes steal the plates, and they would go to the trash pile and get the broken plates, and they would make points from that, or they would get the the old insulators from railroads, or they would get the milk of magnesia bottles. That would be a favorite for them, and they would make it out of glass because glass was easier to work than obsidian. And obsidian's a volcanic glass, but not all obsidian is pure obsidian. There's a lot of abnormalities in the obsidian, but you take a glass plate or a bottle or something like that, it's pretty pure. So it was easier to make a more precise point. So it's maybe not a fair comparison, but some of the points that I've got that are also from that area, they were a lot of people call them the Mill Creeks. The Yahi, also known as the Mill Creek Indians, because they came from the Mill Creek area. And those points are still fairly well made, but they're not Ishi quality. And maybe that's because Ishi was really, really good at what he did.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because of the media he worked in, in the glass, the bottles and the plates and things was easier to work than obsidian.
Regardless, it's got to point to the high level of skill that society had.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
You just think of the chances of just picking one guy out of that stream of people for generations, and him being as competent as Ishi was.
Right.
Pretty unique.
As far as his hunting and shooting ability, there's a lot of documentation that Pope wrote about, and some of the others wrote about. His shooting skills were good, but they weren't. He wasn't going to be an Olympic caliber archer, but that's not what he trained for, and that's not what he was about getting the animal close, because when you loosed an arrow at an animal in his culture, that was dinner. And if this doesn't work, if I don't hit him or I don't kill him or I don't find him, I'm not eating tonight. Well, their focus and their effort was getting the animal close. So I don't care about shooting 30 yards. We go out and we shoot 30 yards, 40 yards sometimes for fun. He didn't care about that. So, Pope, and especially Young, were much better shots.
Okay. Did Ishi have a floating anchor?
If you look at him, he would anchor more into here. And his style, he didn't put his fingers around the string like we do, 2 fingers under, 3 fingers under. He would pinch the string and bring it back, and it was more like this.
What was the weight of the bows that he was making?
I would guess, I've never seen an Ishi bow, but I would guess the bows are probably, going to be 40 pound. They're not heavy.
And he's pinching that string.
Yeah.
I guess whatever you train yourself to do with your hands
his hands and his feet
muscle.
were so, stories of his feet. They gave him shoes when they caught him in the stockyard. They gave him some clothing, and they gave him some shoes, and he wouldn't wear the shoes. They weren't comfortable to him, but his feet were so calloused and so rough, that he didn't need the shoes.
Yeah.
And so, if you've done this all your life, if you walked over rocks all your life, if you've drawn the bow this way all your life, it's just like playing a guitar. You're going to have calluses, and your body's going to adapt to that.
Bear, show him your fingers.
I've been shooting with 2 fingers for maybe like 8 months, and the 2 fingers that I pull back with are like significantly bigger than the other.
Yeah, of course.
He's been shooting without a finger tab.
Yeah.
So it's just been which if you don't know traditional archery, that's most people, I don't do that.
Pretty hardcore.
I shoot 3 fingers under, which isn't necessarily that popular either, but I use a finger tab. If I pull back a traditional bow much over 40 pounds with bare fingers, it hurts my fingers.
Yeah.
The Bear the other day was like, "Hey Dad, look at my hands," and his fingers are like notably bigger on the 2 that he's been working. So you start to see.
Yeah.
You do that your whole life.
There's an illustration in one of the books that Gene has of Ishi's bow hand too, and the way he held it.
More or less.
Yeah, it's weird how he used his fingers for a rest. I can't even.
Oh, you're talking about the bow hand, not
shelf,
the string hand.
Shelf.
The way he did it
he would somehow. I can't even try to recreate it here, but he would use his hand. He didn't have a shelf on his bow. He didn't have a rest on his bow. The arrow would lay on his fist.
Yeah, but he tucked his thumb. It was like a weird.
His thumb was the shelf?
Yeah.
I've seen it. It's odd. Man, they must have been getting stuff close.
Yeah, and that was the whole point, and deer were, I gotta say, we both hunted a lot, and sometimes you get into an area where the animals haven't been hunted as often or as hard, and they're not as wary. So, I'm thinking, they're not, the whitetail in California at that time period were probably not as wary as the whitetail we have today, which see people every day, have arrows shot at them every week. It might have been a little different game to get animals closer to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're in your museum, though. You've got like 2,300, over 2,000 bows and stone
and I
points.
focus again back to that. We get a little rabbit hole now and then, but they come back out of the rabbit hole now. What I like are the pre-1950, and that's the era where, I call it the pioneering era, from 1870s to 1950. This is when people are starting to really get into the sport for the first time.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have books to read. We don't have magazines. We don't have videos. And we're going out and we're shooting a bow and arrow, and it looks like fun. It sounds like fun. It is fun, but I don't know what I'm doing. How does an arrow work? What kind of broadhead should I be using? They didn't know that a broadhead had to be razor sharp, surgical sharp. They didn't know that, you know, all the things that we take for granted today about hunting with a bow and arrow. They were learning. They were discovering. And even when I started, my first year bow hunting was for deer was 1970. And a lot of the things I was taught in 1970 aren't true. I was taught that you wanted to get an arrow in a deer, and you wanted that arrow to stay in a deer, because when he ran, you wanted it to cut, cut him more as he was running. Well, after that, we learned that we need to get blood on the ground. And to get blood on the ground, you need an exit wound. And that's where, you know, especially shooting from a tree stand, the entrance wound's going to be high, the exit wound's going to be low, and your blood trail is going to come from down here. So we want complete pass-through to be able to get that blood on the ground. Well, for that to happen, we want that arrow to pass through the animal as quickly and effortlessly as possible. We don't want the arrow to stay in the animal because we're not going to get a blood trail.
Yeah.
So they were learning all this stuff. You know, they were writing the books. And that's the period I like. That's the period I like to focus on. So when I'm looking for things in my collection, I'm not looking for, you know, a 1970 Bear Kodiak. They're great bows. I'm looking for something that was a wood bow that was made by somebody with a spoke shave and a draw knife over their workbench, and their blood, sweat, and tears are still, their DNA are still on that wood. You know, that's the kind of stuff I like in my collection.
Yeah. Yeah.
In 70 years, we'll be buying Bear's classic bows and putting them in a museum.
Right. He's got to sign it, though.
Yeah, I need a
So
brand.
I wanna ask you two to give us a place to start. What stood out to you, Josh, in this second episode?
Man, it's such a powerful story, and I think that there's a lot of things that us in modern society could pull from the life of Ishi after his emergence. And I think I'm drawn to the character of Ishi.
Yeah.
And I have great appreciation because the injustices that were done to his people and to him,
And he was an eyewitness to all of that.
exactly, were incalculable to us. Like,
Yeah.
we can't even be compared. Like, we don't understand that. But to take this man from a jail cell in Oroville to Berkeley, and for his, I don't want to say assimilation, because I don't know that Ishi assimilated, but his adaptation to life inside of modern society was incredible. And the way that he was able to, I can't imagine that Ishi ever forgot about his family or how he lived, but how he didn't carry that. I don't know another way to say it than he walked through a fire, came out, and didn't smell like smoke. Mm-hmm. And he was able to live his life joyful, build strong relationships with people that he cared about, live a life in a world that was completely unimaginable to him previously.
Right.
I think is just commendable for a human being.
Yeah.
And that is really what impacted me when I hear his story.
Gene said it a couple of times just about the character of Ishi.
The character of the man was incredible.
Yeah.
You know, he comes out of hiding in 1911, and he's seen his whole family, his whole culture, his whole tribe killed before his eyes. These are things he's eyewitness to. And he comes out of that in 1911, comes down into that stockyard, and within a matter of 2 months, he's at the University of California, and they're opening the anthropology wing. And of course, Ishi's going to be a focus of the new anthropology wing they're opening. And so they have all these dignitaries coming from all over the country to come to the opening. They would have come anyhow, but they're coming really now, especially I want to see Ishi while I'm here. So he's got to transform from this Stone Age man to this man who's going to be welcoming dignitaries at the university opening of their new anthropology department in just a matter of 2 months. So he's in good clothing, and he's taught enough English to be able to welcome those people. And when he welcomes those people, in his culture, in his mind, he has to give them the respect to say their name.
Yeah, so that was something that he was doing on his own.
He was doing that on his own. He wasn't coached to do that. That was part of his culture. That was part of his respect, for other people. So when he would be introduced to somebody, he would, hello, Mr.,
He would repeat their name.
He would repeat their name on purpose because that was his way of showing respect to people who have killed his tribe, his family, just a matter of years before that. And that was a sign of his culture,
It's interesting because it was said, and Kroeber said it in her book, but about how he wouldn't say his name because there was no one
left alive to give me a name.
Yes.
But that was the story he gave. Of course he had a name. That was the story he gave them. But of course he had a name.
Yes.
He just, in his culture, you weren't allowed to say your own name.
Right. Well, it's interesting that he was doing what, like by him saying your name, it kind of validates that.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to say my name, but
I will
say
it's very
yours.
important for me to know your name.
Yes.
But it's not so important for me to be speaking my name. So it was, again, back to the culture of that society, that it was not all about me. It was about you. It was about us.
Mm-hmm. That statement right there and the stuff about the name, my brain just spins when I try to understand what it would be like to not have this Western ideology of this individualistic society.
Right.
It's so deep
Something
in
to
us.
take away from that.
It's so deep inside of us, this idea of exceptional, like personal exceptionalism, me.
Right.
Look what I've done.
Right.
I mean, we've talked about it in other things, but we did a series on Tecumseh, the Shawnee leader, and I talked to Ben Barnes, the chief of the Shawnee today, a modern chief, and he says that in their language, even the structure of language and where they put nouns is different than English. English emphasizes who, what, who did it.
Yeah.
Like if I'd say something, I say, I cooked the soup. Emphasis on I. Mm-hmm. And in the Shawnee language, the emphasis would not be on you, me, or who did it. The soup was cooked.
Yeah.
And, the point is,
it's foreign to us. But there's something to be learned from that, right? I think there's a good moral lesson there for us.
Yeah.
And I think another interesting story, in that time period there where he's just come out of this Stone Age culture and how he's living in, the University of California and meeting all these dignitaries from all over the world. And he would be invited to go into these different rooms, different meetings and such. And when he walked into the room, one of the things he would always say to people as he walked in, and he was trying again to speak English, he was trying to assimilate, his into this new world. And when he walked into the room, he would say, "Everybody happy?" And it was really important for him. It was really important for him to know that everybody in the room was feeling good. Are you happy? Everybody happy? You can just imagine his accent, saying that. And I think that's just another aspect of who he was as a man. But I think he was as a man probably as he was the culture.
Yeah. I'm just imagining him walking into his camp on Mill Creek with his mother and his sister, cousin.
Yeah.
And that was part of their culture.
It was part of their culture.
It would have had to have been. And that's what's so unique about Ishi that we'll never, at least on this continent, that never have another opportunity is to deal with somebody that was that isolated from Western society.
Yeah.
And to draw these conclusions about who they were. Here's the questions that I have, though. Like talking about how happy Ishi was. It's possible a critic today could be like, well, was he really happy?
Was that just a face?
Well, and we all know that humans, we're supposed to not just we live in a restraint is powerful. Like if I'm unhappy right now, like you don't have to know about it. I mean, so like I wonder how traumatic, how much of his front of being happy and cordial
I think there
was real.
Here's what I think, and I feel pretty confident in this. When the door was closed, he had to shed tears. He had to. But when the door was open, that was the real Ishi. You know, the inside of Ishi was a happy person. The inside of Ishi was an optimist. When the door was closed, the memories had to come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild that he didn't hold any, or at least it doesn't seem like he held any bitterness towards the people that wiped out his whole culture.
Yeah.
I think that bitterness, though, is an artifact of our modern society. I really do. Like, I don't think he would have known that he had permission, and I don't know, not permission from a person. That's not what I mean, but like bitterness. I don't know. I just don't. I think
wasn't really
there's something
option.
inside of. There's something about knowledge and the communication and the all the biases that we have about other people or other social classes of people or people from wherever that like you kind of like. You know, I'm gonna feel like you can.
I'm gonna. You know, this just hit me as you said that. It just hit me. The world today is filled so full of hate, and I wonder if hate was a concept that he even had. You know, and maybe that was the difference.
Well, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, just, you know, everything that's happened over the last few weeks, months, and even years, you know, hate is a big part of our culture today. Wow. See, if we didn't have hate, maybe that's what separated him.
Well, and the fact that we could imagine a culture that didn't have hate.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you would think Ishi, with this little tight group of people that have been exterminated, that his family would have been sitting up on that mountain looking down there saying, those evil people are trying to kill us.
Right.
We've got to, and maybe they weren't.
You know, and I've got a bookshelf full of books on Ishi. You know, Krober's book is one, and that's the most well-known, but there's a lot of books. I brought several here today. Every book that I've read about Ishi over the years, nothing in there has ever makes you believe there was animosity. You know, hate or animosity, whichever word you want to use. Nothing in there ever leads me to believe that he or his family members ever had any of that feeling, even while they were all alive.
That's an odd place to be, though, when you know that these people are after you to kill you.
Right.
The surveyors that stole all their gear and supplies, which is just. It's just hard to imagine.
Yeah.
I also know that historical revision is really complicated for us today to be like, oh, those, you know, barbarians, how could they do that? I mean, you know, in their time, I don't know. For some reason, they felt the liberty to take that stuff from them.
How could you do that? You know, I mean, this old lady is obviously on her deathbed, laying there in the camp, and she's under the covers, and you steal everything. You steal everything except the bed and the covers that she's got. You take everything that they need to make food, to get food, to gather food, the baskets to carry the food. They take it all as souvenirs and leave the lady laying there. I mean, what kind of person does that take?
Yeah. That's one of the wild stories.
That's one of the ones that makes me just cringe, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I just, you know, human nature can sometimes, maybe there's evil in us that is buried deep, and most of us keep that buried deep, and sometimes it comes to the surface, and that came to the surface.
I think that would be a result of generations of not viewing those people as
they're not
humans.
People. Right.
I mean, it's just like in there had been, that was at the tail end of literally a centuries plus long genocide.
Yeah.
So it's like these people were subhuman.
Right.
I think that's the only way that you could justify
It's the only
that.
way you could do it in your mind. How could you sleep? You know, the story of Kingsley's Cave, which we talked about in the podcast, is one of the last massacres, you know, mass massacres of the Yahi. And there were about 33 Yahi in this cave. They had been chased by these people, these 4 vigilantes, and 33 of the last remaining Yahis go into this cave, and these men walk in there with their rifles and just start shooting. You know, these people in a cave, backed up against the wall, and they just, men, women, and children, and they just start shooting and one of them had a 56 caliber Sharps rifle. And he's just blasting away with this repeater sharps. And he puts the rifle down and picks his pistol up to finish the job. And you know what he said afterwards? I put the rifle down and picked up the pistol because the rifle was tearing them up too bad, especially the little ones.
Wow. Brutal.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, that makes me cringe sitting here today.
The brutality of it. Wow. Incredible. Yeah.
But, go back to talk about the good things about Ishi. I think, again, the things we can learn from Ishi, the optimist in him. When they went on the 1940 expedition back up into Yahi country, he didn't want to go because there were too many, I think.
What, you said 1940.
1914.
14.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
1914. He takes Pope and Waterman and Kroeber and Pope's son, Saxton Jr. Well, they planned this trip without him really being involved. And then they go to him and say, hey, Ishi, we're going to go back up into where you came from, and we're going to do a little expedition back up in there to see all these stories you tell us. We want to go see it. Ishi's like, I don't really want to go. I mean, and I can imagine what's going on in his mind. There's a lot of ghosts up there that, memories that I don't want to relive. He didn't say that, but I got to think that's what he's thinking.
Yeah.
He didn't want to go. One person that I read speculated that he didn't want to go because he thought they were going to take him back up there and release him, that they're going to put him back into the wild. Well, no, that's not what they were going to do. They wanted to truly go learn more about him and his culture by going into where he lived and where he hid for during those 40 years of concealment.
Right.
So they go up into there, and they finally convince him to go up into there, and we talked about that in the podcast. They had to make sure that all the equipment they took was stored in a room where it wasn't near the bones and all the things in the museum, because the spirits would have been not favorable on the trip if that had happened. So they put everything in boxes, and they shielded it all, and convinced him that the spirits can't get into these boxes. And they go up into the...
Ishi knew that was hogwash.
Well,
he was just like,
but he
was just like, whatever.
He said, but when he got there, once he got there, it was like you could, the relief over him to be back home. It feels good to be home. It always feels good to be home, right? That I don't want to go to. I'm home, feeling that he must have had. And he took them around to all the places that he grew up, and where the stories he had been telling them about killing the bear. When he was a young man, he killed a bear. And I liked the way you said it in the podcast, the ceremonial disposal of the carcass was, he did that. And all these years later, he's able to walk them back and go to that spot and dig those bones up. This is where I killed the bear.
Wow.
And,
wow.
He took them swimming in the holes where he swam as a young man. He took them back to the grizzly bear's hiding place where he was with the last four when the surveying party found them in 1908. He recreated that whole experience for them on that trip. And that trip lasted like 6 weeks. And it was,
Can you imagine that trip? Like when my buddy Steve Ranella always talks about if he could go in a time machine, he'd go back with like the Pleistocene hunters and seeing them kill mammoths and stuff. That trip right there would be high on the list.
That'd be on my bucket list.
Of a time machine trip to imagine going back there with him. The question that I have about that trip, and again, it's going back, trying to get into the head of Ishi, but would he have wanted to go back? And if he could, go back and live, because you think about
the books talk about that, and his feelings were, no, that's the old me, the new me is here. I'm happy now. I'm happy at the university. I'm happy with my job. I'm happy.
Do you think that's true? Because there could, and again, I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate, but just kind of trying to answer some questions. Historical revision, you go back and you say, was the guy really happy, or was he just appeasing his captors? How much agency did he actually have?
There's got to be truth to both of that, because I think, again, the stories and the memories must have been overwhelming.
Right.
And as a person, you, me, all of us would be the same way. If we'd witnessed the genocide of our people, of our family, I don't know that I want to go back there. That's too painful.
Right.
But on the other hand, if I push those out of my mind, that was home. That was where I came from. That's me. Yeah. So I think that's where he transformed. When they first approached him, he was like, no, not going to do it. And then he was like, once he got there.
I also know that it's a very difficult thing to not over romanticize like his life living off the land too. Mm. I mean, I think it's possible that he would have come into civilization to California and he would have been like, oh, I can eat 3 times a day.
Yeah.
I don't have to go and hunt.
Right.
This bed's pretty comfortable.
Yeah.
These people are pretty nice. In our mind, in modern civilization, like now we have this romantic thing, like we're trying to go back. We're like, oh man, if he could have just roamed the woods.
Yeah.
Man, he sounds like, by all accounts, he came into this place and was just like, this is the way I want to live. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's probably not fair to say that completely.
I think, the relief of not having to worry, not just about being able to sustain my life through hunting and fishing and gathering, but the relief of not being shot at every day, or being shot at every day. It must have been, I can finally sleep. I can finally relax. I can finally rest.
Yeah.
It probably not just the creature comforts that he had, but it was the life that he had.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, man, wouldn't it have been incredible if he would have lived 25 years?
Yeah, the more we could have learned from him.
That's the saddest part of the deal. I mean, people should probably learn if they listen to Bear Grease and it's an old story, there's going to be some tragic death inside of it. Yeah. Almost all these stories end in a tragic way. Mm-hmm. But I mean, now the fact that he was here for 5 years, I'm grateful for that. I mean, he could have come in and died of tuberculosis in 6 months of
or
being
he could,
here.
Maybe he would have came in and not been associated with Krober and Waterman and Pope. Everything just came together. It couldn't have been scripted any better.
Yeah.
For those people, Edwin Sapir, the linguist, Krober and Waterman, the anthropologists, Pope, the doctor, to have all come into the story and all of them been the people they were. They really helped, that story flower.
Yes.
Ishi could have been captured, taken somewhere, and the story would have been over.
Yeah.
Without those people.
Yeah.
What I've found most interesting about the podcast and just like listening to the whole story was like how Ishi was kind of this like bottleneck of knowledge. Like all the knowledge from like thousands of years got passed through one man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you just wonder how much of that was lost. Like whenever you look at like Arkansas black bears, they had this major population bottleneck. And so now like the genetic diversity is still recovering. It's the same way with all that knowledge. It kind of came down to this really tight bottleneck where it was just Ishi. And then now it's kind of back on the, like the knowledge is kind of being spread, but I'm sure a lot of it is kind of being rediscovered. I'm sure like you just have to imagine how much of it would have been lost.
Yeah.
Like how much we don't know. I mean, like the fact that Ishi could go kill a deer in 3 days is like, with a primitive weapon. Like I tried all season last year to do that and couldn't do it. So it's like, it just makes you wonder how much did the generations of knowledge, how much of that got lost.
Oh, yeah. We had this conversation yesterday about they go up there and in 3 days kill a deer with a primitive bow. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's pretty hard. Mm-hmm. I challenge anybody in the country. Go out with a primitive bow. And there's guys that do it and can and have, and we've done it. But just on the spot to just go kill a deer with a bow.
I'm going to back up a little bit. You asked me earlier about some of the things in my collection. One of the things in my collection is a quiver, a back quiver. It's a belt quiver of Saxon Popes. It came from the Pope's family directly. And it's made of whitetail deer hide. Pope wouldn't have gone and bought a whitetail deer hide and made a quiver from it. Pope killed that deer. Probably Pope killed that deer. Could have been Ishi, but it's probably Pope killed that deer and made that hide or made that quiver out of the hide from the deer he killed. Because Ishi was there to teach him how to do that. And he didn't kill that many white-tailed deer, so it had to be one of the few white-tailed deer he killed in this time period. He died in 1926. And that story of him going up into the mountains with Ishi was 1914, so a very short period of time there. And, he killed, I don't remember now exactly, a half a dozen deer during that time. And one of those deer is
Could
that
have been
quiver.
the quiver that
It is.
got.
It has to be.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that you can touch the history, when you hold that in your hands, like holding that issue point or holding that quiver or the bow that Pope killed the lions with over in Africa. When you hold that in your hand, you're holding the history of that bow, but you're also holding the history of that man, the man that made that bow, the man that used that bow. And that to me is what collecting is all about. It's not, my collection isn't worth a nickel. You couldn't buy my collection. People have tried. It's not money. It's history. It's people. It's stories. And that's what makes it valuable.
So interesting. What were the things that you said you wanted to, you said there were a few things you wanted to clear up?
Well,
We discussed them.
yeah, I think going back, and you set the plate for us here when you talked about earlier in this taping, you talked about the character of the man. And that's one of the things I didn't think I did a good enough job with when in the two podcasts earlier. We talked a lot about the events and we talked a lot about the stories, but we didn't talk enough about the character of the man. So we've talked a little bit about that today, and I think that's one of the main things I wanted to cover. But what kind of soul it takes to go through what he went through and come out of it an optimist. And walk into a room, everybody happy. When he left that trip in 1914, when they finished the trip, and they come back to the train station, and they're going now back to Oroville. There's a crowd at the train station waiting to see Ishi leave. They're the hometown. He's the hometown hero, right?
How ironic is that?
Yeah. Just years before, you're trying to wipe out the whole culture, and now he's the hometown hero.
Yeah.
Well, there's a crowd of people at the train station to see Ishi leave, and that surprises Ishi, and it kind of must make him feel good. So he's on the train, and he lowers the window, and he sticks his head out the train window, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, goodbye."
Really?
And that's
Wow.
that's the kind of man he was,
Ladies
That's
and gentlemen, goodbye.
my fans.
Yeah. Wow.
But,
Golly.
and he came from, to really emphasize that point, in 1894, while he was still in concealment, there was one of the ranchers who his cabin had been raided, most certainly by the Ishi, or by the Ahi over the years, had gotten tired of being raided, things being stolen from his cabin, so I'll get those rascals. So he put a sack of flour out on the table, and he wasn't there. He used the cabin only temporarily or part-time. He puts a sack of flour on the table, and he poisons the sack of flour with rat poison. And he puts a sign on the sack of flour that says poison. Now, his logic was, if white man comes in, white man can read, and he won't take the flour because he knows it's poison. But if those rascal Yahi come in here, they won't be able to read. They'll take the flour, and it'll kill them. So that's the kind of life that he lived for 40 years in concealment. People trying to kill him, not just shoot him, but poison him, vermin, rat poison.
Wow.
And he comes out of that. Everybody happy? How do you do that?
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's such the story that shows the humanity of all people.
Yeah.
Just all the differences that we have and that we see that are external between men. I mean, from different cultures, different times, the way we do things, the way we think about God, the way we think about our families. Man, there's really not that much difference in all of us.
You know, there shouldn't be.
And the fact that this was notable to me, how quickly Ishi understood in a functional way the modern world.
Within a matter of days.
Just showed, like, there's no gap in his intelligence. You could have taught Ishi how to fly an airplane.
Yep.
He could have been a pilot in 6 months and flown a plane if he'd have been alive today.
Obviously an intelligent man.
It was not an intelligence issue, which I think sometimes there's this gap in our ability to think about these primitive cultures as well. They must have been, not intelligent. Not so. I mean, Ishi could have had a IQ off the charts. I'm not saying he did, but he could have. And there were people that did that were just brilliant, and just so interesting
for his family and his other tribe members to have lived 40 years up there in concealment, and for many of those years, people believed they were extinct because they were so good at covering their trail, and they walked from rock to rock, careful not to even make a footprint anywhere, not bend a branch, not break a branch, not leave any trace behind. I mean, that's a sign of intelligence there, in its own way. How could you be able to, think strategically like that for so many years?
Yeah. Hey, I want to do something, and I want to do it while Gene's here. And it's going to surprise y'all because y'all didn't know I was going to do this.
Okay.
We have a thing, Gene, that's called the Bear Grease Hall of Fame, where we take this actually quite serious. It started a little bit as a kind of a funny thing,
right?
But these are all people that we've done stories on. Not all of them. I mean, we've done hundreds of stories, but there's like 12. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There are 11 people in the Hall of Fame. Some of our Hall of Famers would be Daniel Boone, George McJunkin,
Roy Clark.
Now, Roy Clark is a plot man.
Oh, okay.
This is not the singer Roy Clark. Yeah. Tecumseh's there, Davy Crockett, Holt Collier. Some of these other guys are living guys. But we typically, before we do a Hall of Fame induction for a person, we usually take a long time to think about it and talk about it.
Yep.
Y'all know what I'm about to do?
I do. I feel it coming.
I want to make a motion to nominate Ishi to be in the Bear Grease Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
I will second that.
Agreed.
Can we get a raise of hands all in favor of Ishi being in the Hall of Fame?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Without a doubt.
Never before have we so quickly put someone, but when these stories started happening, I was like, Ishi's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll get a little plaque made.
Yep.
And he'll be the 13th inductee into the Bear Grease Hall of Fame.
Excellent.
Yeah, and the guys that we put in there's some level of character that's in every one of these people that stands out to us. It's not just
accomplishment based.
It's not just accomplishment based, but there's a component of character, and it's interesting. That's what you emphasized, and that to me, that's what stands out about Ishi. Maybe it's the most, it's the part of it that you wouldn't think would be most interesting, but probably is.
Yeah,
is how he
could have been just another story. I think if he hadn't been the person he was, and the character of the man, I think is what separates him.
Yeah,
it makes him such a unique part of that story.
Yeah. Wait, before we close down, and we're in no hurry, I want to talk to you about Fred Bear.
All right.
Another
one of my heroes.
If you don't know who Fred Bear is, I would imagine most people who listen to this podcast would, but Fred Bear is considered the father of modern bow hunting, and but to meet somebody that actually knew Fred Bear is pretty unique. But tell me how you knew Fred and just kind of your impressions of him.
Well, I've been a bow hunter all my life. Again, I told you earlier, my first big game animals were grasshoppers when I was 6 years old out in the cow pasture. So I've always been infatuated with the bow and arrow. Growing up, turning on the TV and watching the American Sportsman, Fred Bear, Glen St. Charles, hunting British Columbia for grizzly bears, the highlight of my life, as a young person. And then I started a retail business, an archery retail business back in Columbus, Indiana, late 70s. And I was a bear dealer. So as a bear dealer, right, you get to go to shows. You get to go, at that time, the SHOT Show. There wasn't an archery trade show at that time. So going to the SHOT Show, and I got to be introduced to Fred as a dealer. And Fred was such a humble man. If you're a dealer, you're at the top of the pyramid in Fred's mind, because you're the one out there, you're the foot soldier out there bringing our sport to the people. Mm-hmm. You're the top of the pyramid, and that's the way Fred treated you. So as a dealer, I got to meet him several times, going to shows several times. But then after a while, you kind of get to know each other, and it becomes more of a we weren't hunting buddies or anything like that, but we got to spend time and talk and build a friendship. But such a humble man, and every story you hear about Fred, you would think maybe somebody of that stature with the all those accomplishments that Fred had would have an ego. Fred had nothing close to an ego, and that's just, he would walk up to you, shake your hand, and he wanted to know about you. What's your story? How are you doing? And that was Fred Bear. And I think without Fred, there were a lot of people making archery equipment back in the 30s. He started, go back to Ishi. Ishi brought Pope into archery. Pope brought Will Compton and Art Young into archery. Art Young brought Fred Bear into archery. Fred Bear brought me into archery. Right. So I look at it like a family tree. Fred was Uncle Fred to a lot of us, and I think his story is worthy of a deep dive.
Yeah, I've said it before. Fred Bear, we've got to do a bear grease at some point on Fred Bear. I mean, he deserves definitely
Absolutely.
the look. You said something, and I want to talk about this. You said that Fred was the best marketer of archery, maybe of all time.
Yep.
And that could be taken as, Fred was just a good businessman and charismatic. But you kind of looked at it, and I would too, as that marketing ability was actually really powerful, not just for the sport of archery, but for getting people on the bandwagon of modern hunting and conservation. So, it took somebody that was really good at marketing, and this is relevant today, and this is kind of where I'm going. It took somebody like a Fred Bear, like we're all here today, maybe in large part because of a Fred Bear that marketed this to the world.
Right.
And it wasn't just, you said this, but it wasn't just, you said it on the podcast. It wasn't just about making good archery equipment. He knew it had to be marketed.
Well, you go back, he started Bear Products Company in 1933 in Detroit. And at that time, archery and bow hunting in particular was not a very big sport. There might have been a few hundred people across the whole country that were hunting with a bow and arrow. But he saw it, his love for the sport, he saw it as something that he could bring to the masses, and he could grow this. So it wasn't necessarily just to grow bear archery. It was to grow the sport. And that's why all the patents that Fred ever put, he got a lot of patents on archery equipment. He never enforced any of them. He patented the bow quiver. Can you imagine how much royalties he could have made off of enforcing the patent on the bow quiver? But it was more important for him to see that be used to grow the sport than it was to make a dollar. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that goes back to character. The character of the man. He cared about building the sport. That was what was important to him. And that's, bear archery will grow, but only because we're building a sport for it.
Right. Okay, the reason that's relevant today is that there's a group of people, it's a very small minority of people that would say that modern hunting is over-commercialized and is being marketed just for the sake of companies making money, which there are plenty of companies that make money. MeatEater makes money. Bear Archery makes money today. Matthews Archery. Companies do make money.
That's what they're in business for.
But their criticism is that we're promoting the sport of hunting for the sole purpose of making money, and there's a whole bunch more people in hunting today because of influencers and outdoor media than there would have been. And I heard you say something before this. You said, oh, there's always been those guys. I mean, basically, the opinion of these folks is that we should hunt and not talk about it. And in short, what I would say is that if we hunted and didn't talk about it, a generation from now, this whole thing would be dead.
It'd be gone.
Yep.
Do you believe that to be true?
Absolutely true. I've been an active member of Pope and Young. I'm a senior member of Pope and Young. And Fred was a big part of Pope and Young. And Fred was bear archery. He was in the business. He was one of, some people will say, that the commercialization of our sport has ruined our sport. Well, if that was true, Fred Bear would have been one of the first guys commercializing our sport. He didn't ruin our sport. He built our sport. So are you commercializing the sport for the sacrifice of the sport? Or are you commercializing to build the sport? Yeah, I'm going to make a few dollars. Like I said, Fred made money with Bear Archery Company, and that was his livelihood from 1933 until he passed away in 1988. But he didn't do it at the sacrifice of archery. He did it at the benefit of archery.
Right.
And that's another quote I want to give here, and we talked about this earlier too. One of the people that I've crossed paths with in my life was the guy that started Muzzy Archery Company, John. And John and I got to be friends over the years. And John said something to me one day at a show, and he said, there's some people who want to be something in archery, and there's other people who want to do something for archery. And I sat down and I thought, wow, that's really deep, Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we're at. Are you doing what you're doing because you want to do something for archery?
Right.
Or are you doing it because you want to be somebody in archery? Are you trying to be another Fred Bear? There'll never be another Fred Bear. Quit trying. It's not going to happen. You're just making a fool of yourself. But if you're trying to do something for archery, hats off to you.
Yeah. And I think that's a powerful distinction, because we have something today that we've never had before, which is social media influencers, which is a whole different category of marketing that the world's never seen before. And so you could make the argument that there's a lot of people that in the hunting, not just bow hunting, but there are a lot of people in hunting that are trying to make a name for themselves. And you could,
you can smell those people right away.
Well, I think you're right. And I think there's people that would probably get some of them wrong too, because I would, it's possible there would be, there's a lot of criticism of influencers, but my point about the hunting stuff is that our culture, in bicycling and ATV stuff and the equine world and the mule world and sewing and knitting, there are influencers in homemaking, in cooking. Our culture has now social media influencers. Why wouldn't hunting have social media influencers as well? But the motivation of them is everything. And they're bad apples. There are. But I just was thinking about it. I'm connecting all this kind of.
Yeah.
I'm kind of including you in a conversation you maybe hadn't been in before, but like those guys would criticize Fred Bear.
If you think commercialization of our sport is bad, then you're criticizing people like Fred Bear and Ben Pearson.
Right.
And you're wrong.
Yeah.
They commercialized our sport for the sake of our sport.
Right.
Not for the sake of their personal image or to be somebody important.
Right.
They didn't cross their mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just a byproduct of them building our sport.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Any closing thoughts, Josh or Bear?
I don't think so, man. It's been great. I really enjoyed this series, and I enjoyed getting to spend time with Gene. Man, there's a wealth of knowledge in that guy right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't thank you enough for coming to Arkansas and being willing to share your story. Anything we could ever do for you that would be beneficial, we'd do it. I just thank you for
just
generosity.
keep doing what you're doing, and bringing the stories and bringing, sharing the history of our sport and keeping the spirit alive of those people that came before us. I think that's what motivates me. So Thank you for helping with that.
Yeah. Well, all right. Keep the wild places wild, because that's where the bears live.